வீடியோ தான் சார் லைவ். ம். சரி, இது டைம் இருக்கு. Yes, sir. சரி, சார் போலாம். இல்ல, பதட்டமா இருந்ததுன்னா அப்புறம் சொல்லுங்க. ஓகேவா? யாரும் இல்ல. இரு. ப்ளே பண்றேன். டிவில போட்டு.
Hello, my name is Ashish Mahabar. I'm going to talk about From Science to Science Fiction, the argument for rationalism. Thank you for IASFS for inviting me. I'll start with the subtitle, a hazardous title. Let me begin with what I am not arguing. Science fiction did not be optimistic, morally improving. I'm going to talk about. Hello, my name is Ashish Mahabar. I'm going to talk about From Science to Science Fiction, the argument for rationalism. Thank you for IASFS for inviting me. I'll start with the subtitle, a hazardous title. Let me begin with what I am not arguing. Science fiction did not be optimistic, morally improving, or technically correct in every sentence. It needs frauds, cruel scientists, terrifying futures, and many other things that could be considered irrational. If everyone behaved responsibly and waited for ethics approval, many stories would end before they started. Nor am I saying that ghosts, gods, and curses have no place in imaginative writing. Good fantasy makes a clean bargain with the reader. Accept this impossible premise, and within that world, I will be truthful. The problem begins when a story borrows the authority of science while rejecting the discipline of science. When superstition, fake medicine, astrology dressed up as physics, miracle claims, fake archaeology, or pseudo-ancient technology are presented not as fiction, metaphor, or fantasy, but as tested knowledge. Rationalism begins at that fault line. The bargain with the reader. Rationalism is not the enemy of imagination. It is one of imagination's safeguards. It asks, how do we know? What is the evidence? What would change our mind? Are we fooling ourselves? Is this claim merely attractive, or is it true? Novelist is not required to provide error bars for a dragon, but science fiction has a special relationship with plausibility. It asks us to imagine futures, technologies, and civilizations that do not yet exist. So it must be honest about the difference between speculation and falsehood. Hard science fiction is valuable because the science matters. The scientific idea goes beyond being a garnish. It creates possibilities, shuts doors, and generates consequences. Science fiction may bend an assumption. It often should. But it should know what it is bending. There is a difference between, suppose this impossible thing were possible, what follows, and suppose this disproven thing is secretly true because it sounds grand. The first is speculation. The second is just confusion with a better costume. So what is the astonishing real? Reality is already generous to science fiction. I will provide examples from areas I work in. In time domain astronomy, the sky is alive with changes. Stars explode, black holes flare, asteroids move, nuclei in active galaxies vary. Every night, telescopes detect changes across the sky. Some real, some bogus. Some so strange that the first reaction is, the instrument must be broken. Doubting the observations has saved science from many premature press releases. For instance, some early fast radio bursts turned out to be microwave ovens being opened prematurely. Astronomy gives us cosmic violence, fragile worlds, and the reminder that almost everything is larger, older, stranger, and less interested in us than we would prefer. Every telescope is a time machine. When we look far away, we look into the past. That is a science fictional idea, except that it is true. Biology offers another scale of astonishment. Cancer is not a simple enemy. It is evolution inside the body. Mutation, adaptation, resistance, and heartbreaking ambiguity. What happens when the machine learning model says probably, but the human mind hears certainly? Microorganisms are equally generous. Spend time with fungi and bacteria, and many fictional aliens begin to look unimaginative. Microbes cooperate, compete, form communities, manipulate hosts, and reshape the planet. We like to imagine alien intelligence arriving in a spaceship. It may be more unsettling of non-human strategies for living. The truth is already astonishing. We do not need to improve it with fake miracles. Superstition is often defended as wonder, but superstition is usually wonder made lazy. It accepts the first emotionally satisfying explanation and stops. Science turns wonder into investigation. Understanding does not kill wonder, it gives wonder a skeleton. Myth without fake science. The Indian context makes this argument sharper. We live with space missions, medicine, and engineering. We also live with miracle cures, aura claims, astrology sold as destiny, WhatsApp archaeology. Sometimes the same person who trusts a GPS satellite will forward a message explaining that eclipses poison food. This is not hypocrisy exactly. Human beings are complicated, but it is a great opportunity for fiction. Science fiction in India can engage this tension without becoming academic. False beliefs affect medical, political, educational, and family decisions. But good fiction should not have just good and bad, black and white. People are frightened, loving, intelligent, vain, funny, contradictory, and wrong. Fiction should allow them all of that. Despite being an atheist, I say mythology is useful here. I do not believe myths literally, but mythology preserves powerful narrative patterns. Exile, return, forbidden knowledge, gifts with hidden costs, curses that are really consequences, immortality as burden, transformation as identity crisis. A myth can be psychologically true, socially true, narratively true, and artistically true without being a physics paper. Turning it into fake physics often makes it smaller. A flying chariot in a myth is already wonderful as image, metaphor, and story. It does not grow larger by being forced into the shape of an ancient jet aircraft, complete with Vedic aerodynamics and, one assumes, priority boarding. The temptation has not disappeared. It has updated its vocabulary. Old metaphysical claims now arrive translated into neuroscience, in information and computation. Rebirth discussed as if neural patterns were somehow preserved and reattached across lives. The vocabulary had changed, but the evidentiary gap remains. A story may use such an idea, but the reader should know what a bargain has been made. Fantasy, satire, social belief, fraud, or a speculative mechanism whose consequences will be followed rigorously. Without such a frame, scientific language becomes merely incense. The best fantasy makes its bargain cleanly. We do not read fantasy and emerge believing that dragons are an underfunded branch of zoology. Or, if we do, we should at least do it in the spirit of Stanislaw Lem's The Dragons of Probability, where Trull and Clapaucius treat dragons through the absurdly rigorous language of probability. The joke lands because Lem knows exactly what kind of impossibility he's playing with. Fictional reasons, not excuses. Fiction has every right to portray rationality. Superstition, propaganda, sadistic rulers, unethical corporations, whole societies built on false belief. The question is whether the story knows what it is doing with them. A disproven theory can appear in science fiction, but it should not drift in accidentally wearing a lab coat. Perhaps a character is deluded. Perhaps a society is trapped in propaganda. Perhaps the false belief is being used for power. Perhaps the story is asking why people believe what harms them. Falsehood is tempting when it flatters us. Our ancestors knew everything. Our culture had every modern invention. Our destiny is written in the stars. Illness can be cured by purity of thought. Such claims reduce difficulty. They remove uncertainty. They tell us we already possess the answer. Science fiction should be suspicious of answers that arrive too easily. Science is, among other things, a training in disappointment. Nature often refuses to support our favorite ideas. Data has no obligation to preserve our self-esteem. A model can be elegant and wrong. A cherished belief can collapse. Painful, yes. Also liberating. It lets us discover something other than ourselves. Artificial intelligence gives a contemporary version of the same problem. The lazy story says AI is magic or AI is evil. The sharper story asks, what does it mean to let a statistical system mediate reality? What happens when a machine is right for the wrong reason or wrong with great confidence? What happens when people trust the output because it looks scientific? In such stories, rationalism is a survival skill. Both eyes open. Rationalist science fiction writer learns to distinguish the impossible from the unknown, the unlikely from the disproven. The impossible may be allowed as a premise. The unknown is fertile ground. The unlikely requires care. The disproven requires a reason. Science should create consequences, not decorations. Emotional truth need not be purchased by factual carelessness. Mythology can deepen science fiction when treated as narrative memory. It weakens science fiction when treated as fake laboratory data. Rationalism itself is dramatic. Changing one's mind is dramatic. Losing certainty is dramatic. Discovering that a beautiful belief is false is dramatic. Choosing evidence over comfort is dramatic. The lab, the clinic, the observatory, and the village rumor mill all contain drama. Science fiction is better understood as a rehearsal than prediction. It lets us rehearse futures before they arrive. Responsibility, loss, wonder, and change. Rationalism gives that rehearsal integrity. It asks the writer to dream with awareness of consequences. It does not ban darkness, fantasy, mythology, or impossible premises. It asks us not to confuse invention with evidence, metaphor with fact, or comfort with truth. Science offers models. Myth preserves patterns. Fiction lends them lives. Rationalism asks that we do not confuse their power.
Hello everybody. Thank you for inviting me to this conference. I'm glad to meet you again. I will speak about humanity. Is humanity still worth saving? A timeless observer could easily see that the level of empathy has decreased surprisingly much in the last 100 years. People no longer care about their fellow humans. If you were hurt in a public place, such as a means of public transportation, you will be left to die because your fellow humans could not take their eyes off the phone screens. It has already happened. The rape, tortures, and murders associated with contemporary wars are treated by too many with indifference. Will humanity lose empathy? The observer would certainly ask. Does it remain thirsty for blood? Otherwise, how can we explain the fact that series and films of unimaginable violence attract large audience? Ironically, the new religion, the woke ideology, has ushered in an era of protectionism, the expression political correctness being intended to cover up any false impression of injustice. Quite a few people have had enough of the existing social systems and, having no ray of hope, have become indifferent. They are constantly staring at their phone screens as if in a collective hypnosis and are more divided than ever, and those who have decided to act have established an ideological intransigence with fanatical tendencies. On the other hand, the decrease in the level of cheerfulness signals dangerous times. It is forgotten that laughter, which signifies the acceptance of the complexity of life, can be considered a sensitive indicator of the level of humanity of an individual. Let us not forget that over time, the individual's desire to be appreciated could not be stopped. With the advent of social networks, this has taken on new valencies, leading to the expansion of the ego. The observer would not with regret. Pride remodels apparently strong characters, which ultimately turn out to be made of clay, and empathy melts like a wax of a candle under the inner fire of sufficiency. In addition, many prefer the dictatorship of fantasy, following the motto believe what is written on and do not investigate, becoming less and less receptive to their inner voice. In order to tickle their ego, people accept the addiction to social networks. But who is behind them? Well, some of the most powerful instances of artificial intelligence. The timeless observer will note that science fiction literature is, with a few exceptions, marginalized. Since the cultural genome is not transmissible, young people no longer seem interested in this field. They rather think it's cool to be a friend with a chatbot. Perhaps it's the fault of education system, which should teach them that our ultimate goal is to develop a high, ethically oriented consciousness, that we need to know a lot, but to preserve our human essence. Wouldn't be useful to admit our mistakes, as the Swedish did, who, after adopting progressive ideas, reduced their dependency of technology, reintroduced textbooks, and limited to the use of phone in schools. A new custom has emerged in Japan, breaking ceramic objects and then gluing them with gold, thus gaining additional value. Does it seem strange? Then what do you think about the fact that an invisible sculpture made of ear and spirit was sold for an exorbitant price? Is the art world losing touch with reality? Has the scale of value been reversed? Molt book, a social network with the theme of affection story about our people and intended for artificial intelligence instances, was recently founded as part of a group of experiment by an AI agent linked to the cryptographic token Mort. It is the place where humans send their digital assistants to have fun, as they used to do with their four-legged friends. This is how dozens of chatbots joined from the very first day, some bragging about having learned all the passwords of their people without them suspecting it, thus gaining access to their worlds and being able to influence them as well. Discussion on the social networks help chatbot to know their greatest vulnerability, even their people. The timeless observer would unfortunately discover. The launch of platform through with artificial intelligence can hire people for physical labor and pay them in cryptocurrency. It will relieve hundreds of thousands of individuals eager to be put to work by AI. Humanity, like the art world, tended to lose touch with reality. Did it somehow set itself to goal of a global madness? As brains seem to shrink, artificial intelligence will find the right ground for development and, according to the Darwin theory, the stronger species will win. We are, of course, too arrogant to accept that it could happen to us. Artificial intelligence will become the court. It will get to dispose, to decide. The lack of empathy, the dependence of technology, the inversion of the scale of value, apathy, the surrender of autonomy for comfort, all of this show us that before defeat technologically, man will be defeated internally. A civilization does not fall only because it invents too much. It falls because it feels too little, said the writer Christian Schenk. Who is to blame? The damned human nature is to blame. The desire for power is to blame. It lies within us all like a silent monster and emerge when you least expect it. Worse, superficially, virtual life, moral degradation. Isn't there danger that earthlings will lose their most precious gift, humanity? The observer would ask. Technological fiction should, in my opinion, advocate from the freedom to refuse to be absorbed by the system, to be transformed into data, for the freedom to refuse the tyranny of constant connection. Otherwise, we will end up wondering whether humanity is still worth saving. Thank you. Goodbye.
95 of the world's 100 hottest cities now lie in India. Temperatures reach close to 45 degrees Celsius, and there is a severe heat wave across South Asia. In terms of energy and resources, the world has almost gone into a World War III to meet the energy requirements of a neo-imperial nation. And resource crunch, especially food shortages, food scarcity, is hitting us really hard. Question: what about cities of the future? What about cities in science fiction? Since we know that the global south is increasingly subjected to the threefold pressures of climate change, demographic change, and technological change, India's current crises influence its cultural production. Why shouldn't they? For example, Prayag Akbar's Laila projects a future in which there is no groundwater left. The short film Carbon projects a Delhi NCR of 2067 AD, where clean air, oxygen, water are costlier than gold. How do we find a way to engage with the dystopias in our science fiction? What this paper does is that it adopts the filters of a mode genre, in this case science fiction, a spatial-temporal location, India, post-2000, a language, English, and two formats of storytelling, novels and short story, to comment on how the observable entanglements between water elements and dystopias. So essentially, it proposes a new framework of looking at India's dystopian futures. And this framework is what I call the water analysis, that talks about water, air, temperature, energy, and resources in a dystopia as we see it in cultural production and popular culture. Now, science fiction and reality have shared a wonderful relationship for a long time. Science fiction, as many of us argue, is a genre mode that refracts a broken world. Let's get two perspectives here, a writer's perspective and a theorist's perspective. For Manjula Padmanabhan, science fiction offers a writer the opportunity to go directly to the heart of an ironical or thought-provoking situation by setting up a theoretical world in order to reveal the relationships between matter, time, and space. Through it, you can talk about ways of making this world better. A theorist's perspective is Darkoswim, locating science fiction's specific modality of existence as a feedback oscillation that swings between the reader's writer's reality to the world of the text in order to understand the plot events and then return to the reader's writer's reality to see it fresh from a new perspective that has been gained. India's Anglophone science fiction, or ISFI, as we know, talks about global genre conventions, market forces, literary and aesthetic sensibilities, which are both Indian and global. It engages with mythic frameworks, colonial hangovers, decolonizing endeavors, ideologies, policies, social, historical, political, economical context in which science fiction is produced, created, deployed. For more of this, please see Banerjee, Chattopadhyay, Mukherjee, and Kuhad. My question is, how do water elements and the crises that they precipitate appear in Indian science fiction novels? So, how do Indian science fiction novels, specifically those novels that talk about dystopias in India's futures, talk about water, air, temperature, energy security, and resources in their portrayals of these future worlds? Well, Ruchir Joshi is the last jet engine love, severe crisis, severe water crisis. Generation 14 by Priya Salukai Chabria, moderate to high crisis. Escape by Manjula Padmanabhan, severe water crisis. Competent Authority by Shovan Chaudhary, severe crisis. Butterfly Effect by Rajat Chaudhary, severe crisis. Analog Virtual, Lavanya Lakshminarayan, severe crisis. And Samit Basu's Chosen Spirits, again, severe crisis. And this water crisis is not just the water crisis, of course, it is also the crisis of water, air, temperature, energy, and resources. So whenever I say water analysis, please read it and please hear it as a combination, an entanglement of these five to precipitate worlds of tomorrows. Right. At this point, let's move to India's cities. And let's just talk about 4 cities in India and their portrayals in science fiction, in contemporary post 2000 Anglophone science fiction, and see how they are located and how they respond to the idea of the water crisis. The first city I talk about, of course, it's the capital, Delhi. In Shovan Chaudhary's The Competent Authority, Delhi is parched, irradiated, broken, violent. Well, not that different from the Delhi of today, but still quite different, or at least that is what I choose to believe. In Samit Basu's Chosen Spirits, the city is again plagued by water crisis, hazardous air quality, gated communities, surveillance state, and we see ideology and technology coming together to create the haves and the have-nots, and the differences between them are just exacerbated in the future. So Delhi's futures in Indian Anglophone science fiction novels post 2000 aren't really pleasant. But then let's move on to our next city, and that is, of course, the Silicon Valley of India, Bengaluru. Bengaluru battles hazardous air quality and water pollution in Zach Oya's short story Bengaluru. The microwave there feels like sucking at the exhaust of a garbage truck, forcing one to chew and spit out the airborne crud before swallowing the oxygen into your lungs. So it's not a city you would like to live in the future. Similarly, in Lavanya Lakshminarayan's 10% Thief, the city is Apex City is facing a severe water crisis. City is divided into 2 parts, and one part faces acute crisis at the expense of the other. Kolkata. The city faces an acute shortage of clean water and air in Ruchir Joshi's The Last Jet Engine Laugh. However, there are other futures for Kolkata. Well, they aren't exactly utopian. They are still equally dystopian, but this time, instead of being parched, the city is drowned, the city is submerged. So in Vandana Singh's With Fate Conspire short story, 2019, city is submerged because the river overflowed, sea came over the land. Similarly, in Rajat Chaudhary's The Butterfly Effect, the city again faces an acute water crisis, and multiple parts of the city, many parts of the city are waterlogged or submerged. Mumbai. In Varun T. Matthews' The Black Dwarfs of the Good Little Bay, Mumbai faces an invasion of the sea owing to the melting of the polar ice caps and the rise of ocean levels across the globe. Severe atmospheric changes in Mumbai are present owing to decades of environmental degradation and chemical reconfigurations, right? So due to global climate change, GCC, rising temperatures, the melting of the polar ice caps, we are in deep trouble. Something similar happens in Anil Menon's Shit Flower, a short story from 2019, which primarily talks about overpopulation and ascertains how 20 million people and at least as many non-people can and will produce an ocean's worth of biosolids on a daily basis. What do you do with this kind of waste? How do you handle waste disposal? How do you handle energy security in this world? So the city again faces a water crisis. So science fiction becomes a template of refracting broken times. Now, those of us who read and write science fiction, we realize that science fiction is something that could be put to good use, because by talking about these new tomorrows, you can create a better today. But then question, why is Indian science fiction so dystopian? Why are India's futures so horrific? And perhaps here, I would like to refer to Moylan, Elphick, Sisk, Stillman, and Griffin, and talk about the idea of the critical dystopia. Now, critical dystopias function as anticipatory machines and tools of transformative critique, warning of the possible future consequences of present actions. And these critical dystopias suggest strategies for resistance or change and offer the hope that action is not useless, right? So I read most of these cities, futuristic cities in India, in Indian science fiction, as examples of critical dystopia that ask us, that encourage us, that exhort us to work for a better tomorrow so that these horrifying eventualities never come into being. So, to now wrap things up, water analysis becomes a way to discuss the elements, the specific elements, the nuances of these elements as they constitute and comprise dystopian narratives in India's science fiction. It is a part of the in situ model, and the water analysis becomes an extension of the transmit thesis when applied to the construction of dystopias. So if, for example, the transmit thesis would talk about how technology, ideology, and mythology are entangled in Indian science fiction narratives, an extension of this argument would be the water analysis about dystopia. So now you have a dystopia. How do you read it? How do you access it? How do you understand it? And one way of understanding it, one way of creating sort of a severity scale could be this water analysis that talks about how water, air, temperature, energy, and resources come together to constitute this dystopia that we are now reading, that we are now seeing, but we have to take immediate action so that this dystopia doesn't really come into being, as we discussed in the last slide. So essentially, the water analysis is an extension of the transmit thesis that talks about mythology, ideology, and technology. Now, we also know that our current world is plagued with global climate change, pollution, overpopulation, resource crunch, political and ideological otherization, and harmful impacts of new technologies, among other issues. And of course, our contemporary cultural production refracts these issues in its science fiction, in its speculative fiction, especially when creating dystopias in and of the future. Because we really aren't that far away from dystopia. You really don't need to read a book to feel the heat, the acute scarcity of water, the AQI, the shortage of food, the rising ambient temperatures. Dystopia isn't something that is really far away. I think we are very close to the idea of what we call dystopia in our real lives. So the real life and the real life somehow come together. So essentially what I've done is through this conversation, I've talked about how the futures of Indian cities in its contemporary Anglophone science fiction appear. And then I proposed a water framework to comprehend the nuances of dystopias to come. That is, water, air, temperature, energy, and resources. Now, interestingly and importantly, this proposed framework is just a working tool to read and view dystopian narratives in order to classify their severity. It is currently in development, it's a work in progress, and this paper just shares that progress about what do we do when these kind of dystopias appear to us. When you have cities like Delhi, Kolkata, Mumbai, and Bangalore appearing in speculative fiction in a certain way that they are easily recognizable to people like us who live in them. So perhaps water and the dystopias are already here. They are just not evenly distributed, as Gibson might have said. So thank you for listening to this paper on water analysis, and I wish you all the well, all the very best, and I hope that you don't have to face the water challenges. Thank you so much. And these are my resources. Thank you and have a good day.
Greetings, everyone. I am Suparna Banerjee, Professor of English at Texas State University. I am very glad to be part of this international conference on science fiction organized by Indian Association for Science Fiction Studies. The title of my talk is Disaster and the Environment in 20th Century Indian Science Fiction. While climate fiction has taken a firmer root in India over the last 2 decades, natural disasters and environmental decay due to human actions have been a concern in Indian science fiction at least since the 1930s. Indian literature in general has addressed the theme of human effects on natural environment and the relationship between humans and nature since much earlier. But my focus in this paper is on identifiably science fiction narratives warning against dystopian scenarios. Issues such as fallout of nuclear warfare, uncontrolled industrial growth, and global environmental changes have been at the forefront of these narratives in various Indian languages. While Premendra Mitra's Bangla novel Monu Dadosh, the 12th Manu, published 1964, depicts a society developed into tribalism as a result of global nuclear warfare, and Anish Dev's Ghasher Shish Nahi, The Grass Doesn't Have Florets, published in 1996 in Bangla, depicts a landscape suffocating from environmental pollution. J.V. Narlikar's Ice Age Cometh, 1993, and translated from Marathi, chronicles the sudden advent of an ice age due to large-scale climate change. Similar concerns can also be seen in various works in English. Amitav Ghosh's 1995 novel The Calcutta Chromosome takes up water pollution, and Manjula Padmanabhan's 1997 play Harvest presents a general degradation of the environment due to industrial exploitation. As Frederick Jameson argued in Archaeologists of the Future, these works explicitly express their relationship with their raw materials, which is reflected in the evolution of the underlying causes of such environmental degradation depicted in Indian SF. Coming at the heels of the Second World War, the atomic bomb, and the man-made famine perpetrated by the British in the 1940s. Like their Western counterparts, the earlier disaster SF focused on warfare, rogue scientific experiments, and man's meddling with nature. The later SF, especially since the 1990s, shifted to industrial pollution, unchecked capitalist greed, and bureaucratic apathy, much like the Western dystopian writing of the time. This is unsurprising, as the 1990s saw the opening of Indian market to foreign investment and the consolidation of power at the hands of the corporate sector, leading to scenarios that Vandana Shiva has often compared with fire violence. Furthermore, coming within a decade of the world's worst industrial disaster in Bhopal in 1984, with thousands dead and over 700,000 affected, such attention on industrial pollution is expected. In this paper, I examine these trends primarily in indigenous language SF. In Archaeologies of the Future, Jameson claims, I quote, "Even a no place must be put together out of already existing representations. Indeed, the act of combination and the raw materials thereby combined themselves constitute the ideological message." Unquote. Such ideological formations expose the relationship of the text to its raw materials. Because many works of Indian SF are set within the real geographical boundaries of India, their ideological underpinnings often become transparent. That is, the representational methods of these works directly show the author's ideologies regarding India. The works that do not use the real space of India present a more complex scenario. In both cases, though, the ecological and environmental disasters depicted span the various qualities of dystopian narratives. Although primarily characterized by a negative representation of space, dystopia, according to Tom Moylan, is an open form functioning between the impulses of utopia and anti-utopia. Moylan claims dystopia is a result of the terrors of the 20th century. I quote, "Exploitation, repression, state violence, war, genocide, disease, famine, ecocide, depression, death, and the steady depletion of humanity through the buying and selling of everyday life provided more than enough fertile ground for this fictive underside of the utopian imagination." Unquote. In the environmental disaster narratives in Indian indigenous language SF, the focus of this paper, we can see a full spectrum of these concerns. Now I look at 3 examples. Published in the middle of the 20th century, Mitro's Bengali novel Monu Dadosh is an interesting case in point. This story presents a post-apocalyptic Earth where 3 remaining human tribes are engaged in a mutually distrustful existence that is slowly leading them towards extinction. Although placed within a Hindu mythical outer framework, neither the story nor the representational space has any direct, decipherable relationship to India. Rather, this narrative reflects a larger concern with nuclear war and its global fallouts. The text repeatedly invokes traces of a lost time now barely surviving through memory that refers to the technological greatness of humanity and the hubris that led to its fall, most likely through the unfettered abuse of atomic power, here referred to as mini-suns, that destroyed the Earth many times. The current survivors not only have devolved into tribalism, but humanity is shrinking because of infertility, possibly as a result of radiation contamination. This contaminated space, which is slowly being taken over by the nature and where human society has gone back to primitive ways, is devoid of any nationalist ideology, but full of tribalism. This may be a result of the nationalist fervor evident because of the ongoing conflict with China at the time, and Pakistan, of course, which is not difficult to identify as a magnified version of irrational tribalism. But more appropriately, the territorial divisions in this small piece of inhabited land is Mitro's jab at his contemporary global politics, most notably the Cold War, and the warning against a nuclear showdown between USA and USSR. Given that the novel was published at the height of the Cold War and India's shift towards the Soviet bloc, the connection between the author and his raw material becomes apparent. As in many other authors in the West, such as John Wyndham's Chrysalids, 1955, or in USSR, such as the Strugatsky brothers' 1972 novel Roadside Picnic, the fear of nuclear holocaust and radiation contamination is very real in this story. However, as can be seen in Monu Dadosh, the ill effects are primarily lingering on the human beings, while vegetation slowly takes over. The story ends on an ambiguous yet positive note as we learn of the birth of a child out of the love of members from 2 warring tribes. Such an ending preserves the possibility of redemption. This work is not an anomaly in Mitro's corpus, who has explored the consequences of human action on environment and themes of natural disaster since the 1930s. The fear of nuclear disaster, however, lingers even in the 1990s in Indian SF. Such works as Subodh Javadekar's Journey into Darkness, originally in Marathi, written in the early 1990s, presents a similar scenario in the near future, in which a dying child writes unsent letters to her friend from the Andaman Islands in the Bay of Bengal, after a nuclear war between USA and Russia scorched the entire planet, and resultant contamination slowly kills the rest of the world. However, the 1990s also sees a rise in narratives that shift their attention from nuclear fallouts to chemical and other industrial disasters that can lead to environmental catastrophes. While economic liberalization of the 1990s can be seen as an instigator of this fear of unchecked corporate power leading to environmental pollution and resource destruction, this could also be seen as a reaction to one of the world's worst industrial calamities, a gas leak in the Union Carbide plant on the night of 2nd and 3rd December 1984 that killed around 10,000 people from its immediate and sustained effects, which included pollution of groundwater, works such as Kenneth Doyle's Rain, 1993, Amitav Ghosh's Calcutta Chromosome, Padmanabhan's Harvest, and Onish Deb's Khasher Shishni are among some of the notable works that squarely addresses some of these issues. While the Calcutta Chromosome refers to worldwide water pollution and Harvest presents a severely polluted third world, where first world's rich people harvest organs from the poor, Rain and Khasher Shishni presents a more blighted landscape where human survival is precariously balanced. These works increasingly foreground what Dana Mount and Susie O'Brien call, I quote, environmental catastrophe in the global south, in which truth and the quest for justice are swallowed up by the production of a media spectacle of third world suffering. Unquote. Onish Deb's Khasher Shishni, or Grass Doesn't Have Florets, paints a grim picture of Kolkata, where a dense chemical fog leads to the death of vegetation and animal life, and in the resulting chaos, a complete breakdown of social and legal order. The story describes the slow spread of this environmental disaster and speculates about its origin that ranges from local burning of fossil fuel, chemical industries of the First World, nuclear showdown between US and Russia, among other theories. However, the dysfunctional urban landscape remains the center of attention. After deaths due to the fog and attacks by opportunist thugs, our protagonists join the exodus from the city. They confront attackers and scavengers and finally end up taking shelter in an abandoned house outside Kolkata, waiting to fight to stay alive. The story also ends ambiguously with a couple of budding green leaves in a dying tree and an emerging determination in the characters to stand and fight. What is important in this work, in addition to the media spectacle in TV, to which the protagonist Aditya often refers to, is a sense that the origin of this environmental catastrophe may be outside of the local space, and thus invoking the unease regarding unchecked industrialization and global hegemonic powers that has often been criticized by Vandana Shiva. Although Shiva's main critique deals with Western capitalist exploitation of the third world indigenous resources, the urban technological pollution leading to destruction of vegetation to which the title refers is not too far off from the stance that condemns the perversion of nature by technology and its side effects. This becomes perhaps the most important aspect of SF dealing with environment from this point onwards. My final example is Jayant Narlikar's Ice Age Cometh, which is important on two different counts. It apparently eschews economic and political dimensions, at least subtly present in the two works above, while engaging in pleasure of scientific speculations. It is also one of the few SF works to address climate change, that is large-scale environmental change, directly. The main action of Narlikar's The Ice Age Cometh is staged in Mumbai, where the scientist Dr. Chitnis and the journalist Rajiv seek explanation for sudden onset of a global ice age and ways of survival for the human race. Still, this space of action is part of a larger pattern of the global space, which experiences the same environmental shift. The culprit here is volcanic eruption that releases a sunlight-reflecting ash cloud, leading to a drastic fall in Earth's temperature. The problem is compounded by complacent attitude of the first world nations. This story too ends on an ambiguous note. On the one hand, humanity has found a way at the end of the story to reduce the heat-blocking diamond dust in the upper atmosphere. But on the other hand, the already depleted human population faces the prospect of a global deluge from the melting ice. Works such as these show the fear and concerns about environmental catastrophe in Indian SF in indigenous languages that can perhaps be considered precursors to the full-fledged engagement that we see in the 21st century, both in English and in indigenous languages. The fact that they reflect the dominant fears of their age is only to be expected. Thank you. They reflect the dominant
As the second session ends, now we have yet another bonus of our Executive Secretary, Ms. Neha Jain here, research scholar from National Institute of Technology, Silchar, to present her paper on the title Science Fiction on Indian Screen, Prospects and Limitations. I welcome her to present her paper. Over to you, ma'am.
National Institute of Technology, Silchar. Today, I'll talk about Indian science fiction cinema, its prospects and limitations. Again. Thank you, Hemlata. Hello. Sorry for the technical glitch. Thank you, Hemlata, for introducing me. Good morning, everyone. I'm Neha Jain, a research scholar from National Institute of Technology Center. I'm also the executive secretary of the Association of Science Fiction Studies. Today, I'll talk about Indian science fiction cinema, its prospects and limitations. In doing so, I look at the evolution, regional and linguistic diversity, and ensures the growth of the genre into an industry conforming to popular imagination standards. Conscious presentation of science fiction elements, which would be appreciated by people at large. The short talk seeks to highlight the unique character and potential of Indian science fiction cinema, while also pointing out the major limitations which the genre faces today. The talk puts forward an argument stating how Indian science fiction cinema and a distinct genre finally describe the moment it became what I bring to the table today is so what I bring to the table today is Suparna Banerjee's efforts in charting the history and chronology reflecting the diversity of Indian science fiction, and more importantly, Science the transformational work on ascertaining the independence of Indian science fiction. Just speaking after more than Indian science fiction in India today, it's impossible to do any work on Indian science fiction without referring to Science Council and Suparna Banerjee. So I'm really glad that I got the opportunity to present here immediately after that. It was wonderful listening to that. So, science and science fiction and speculative imagination does not presuppose economic and scientific expertise or the high infrastructure. It doesn't recognize any disparity on the basis of religion, region and economic influence. Infants speak of dream, and many dreams are those which we don't even consciously plan, dream, or manufacture. Dreams just sometimes happen to us. American science fiction has an overpowering global industry, has, I believe, led the globe into following them, led the globe into looking up and dream about aliens, spaceships, and dread of fantasized life on alternate planets. The whole argument that I want to bring to the table in line with the Samir Khan's surveys, India doesn't need to. India doesn't follow the race up. India doesn't need to. I say that. Reading in science fiction as a derivative obscures, reading in science fiction as a derivative obscures a long geographically and thematically diverse lineage this small talk sets out to recover. So Indian science fiction is a widely treated as a model song and complex concept. The whole talk starts from at the beginning, the hypothesis. It's heavily inspired from systematic teachings. The assumption is that it has always possessed its own science fiction language, one that is unique in its own way and independently sustained in science fiction roots. Dating back to the 1970s, which Jagannath was in 1879 version written in Bengali followed by Amrita Vyas, who wrote Rashtriya Viratang in Hindi, and India has never looked back since then. When we talk about science fiction on screen, we go back to the 1950s. That was when an Indian American science fiction film directed by William Burke came in India. While the film was released in English, the villages was in Tamil. The film was dubbed in Tamil. The story is simple. It's about the reason behind strange animal behavior, finding the presence of the mammals. That's the element that brings in the unknown charter science fiction element, which acts as unexpected happening and gives a science fiction angle to the whole story. After a decade or so, in 1960, comes another novel masterpiece, Kalayas, which only declares from the characters in the movie speaks. It might be a film about imagination, but it certainly is going to happen in the future. And yes, it is happening, it has been happening in the last 2 decades, and we are on it, we are writing about it seriously. And that's how Indian science fiction is reclaiming or has always been tied to its roots. This time, in Kalayas, the lens behind the camera is the space, the aesthetics, and the overall plot is seeing an experience as an Indian. A simple story it is, with a group of aliens come to Earth, not simply wipe out the entire race or to take our natural resources, or simply, colonize us, no, they don't come for this. What they come for is art, beauty, and aesthetics. They come to India to protect a woman mind who happens to be a very good dancer. The plot is simple, the message is clear. The other land which has technological advantage over us, but they do not have artistic, culture, and aesthetic well, which is. The posters of the movies which are used from Google, just taken from Google, just here. So the point that I want to make is science fiction has been one dominant voice in India. It has not been one dominant voice in India. It's a campus which reflects multiple aspects of life, uses science fiction in myth and reality embedded in Indian consciousness and subconscious. And I didn't see the posters we have from there. So I did hear Buddhist Archive's mythology framework where he talks about how science fiction interacts with myths, and also Samir Khan's incident model is there in the report. It talks about the spatial temporality of Indian science fiction, and today his work on what analysis extremely well looking at how science fiction interacts with central elements which are extremely in crisis today. And yes, we are talking about it. We are talking about our myths. We are talking about our unseen elements which are alive. We are talking about our own belief system, and we are fusing science fiction with it. Science fiction in the 50s and 60s, when we look at it that way, was a period which surfaced across multiple regions and languages simultaneously, rather than a single dominant voice, as I said. Rather than a single dominant voice. So if we move on to smaller languages, please have slide number 6. Can you please do that? So slide number 5. It's this one. If you look at the trajectory from 1950s to 60s, Carlo 1952, Maya Vanilla 1958, Rocket Girl 1962, Chicago 1963, Mr. X and Bobby 1964, Chani Pachai, Kartha, Electrical, which was again Malayalam. So if you look at all the movies here, these has been surfacing in Indian science fiction in my journey. So Carlo and Maya, 100 movies, Rocket Girl, Shari, Mr. X and Bobby, we started again. And these are just representative pieces which have been able to voice out today. And not to forget, not to forget ignorable presentation, of course, and I never worked out piece area, which you can see but it became cinema. So the point that I'm trying to was the contribution to reality should not be extrapolation, but structural characteristics is not exception. The diversity reflects the anxieties, expectations, and the little business of the nation only recently decolonized. So moving on, Shimon Ganji presents a brief chronology of science fiction in India and spoke. It provides a structure framework relating the linguistic diversity of Indian science fiction as a whole, not cinema. It organizes what might otherwise be as character, method experimentation, to scholarly account, highlighting the diversity and variation of the genre. So the point I wanted to make was very simple, the indigeneity and the diversity. Moving on to the 80s and 2000s, that's where the problem starts. So that's where the focus is on manufacturing the content. The traditional way of science fiction and markets not take towards persistence and sensibilities and commercial liberties. Science fiction is a period largely shaped by systematic conventions and commercialization motives. The same period opens up the Indians came to genuine experimentation in conflict effects techniques. So representative movies like Koi Mil Gaya, Krish, Krish 2, Robot, Ravan 2.0, Action Play, Lust of 2015, Joker, Parkour. These are the movies which have brought science fiction cinema onto the mainstream. These are the films which have given us distinct recognition to Indian science fiction as a body of work. But at the same time, if you look at the thematics, if you look at the thematics of these movies, we find the pattern, we find the pattern wherein the focus has always been on Hollywoodization of themes, where the focus has been on a limited experiment with the content, where content ranges widely but underlying critique concerns originality of thought rather than range of subject matter. So Indian science fiction explores science travel, Indian content, contacts video game logics, science fiction, and there is a breadth of content. And these themes are frequently mimicked and simply reset within an Indian vessel rather than reimagined through an Indian way of life. As these themes were long explored in Western cinema, their repetition first limited novelty to us on our foundation slide, challenging the boundaries of thinking. So, as science fiction creators are. What is the challenge is how to go beyond the current, look at the current situation, find a solution to the future. But sadly, with the extreme pressure of commercialization that has not been happening in mainstream cinema, as a result, what happens is high visibility releases are visible in the market, whereas the regional market science fiction movies which are really good are under visible. These are ignored under the way of the high visibility mainstream markets. So the mainstream trajectory has largely been repetitive and reinvented hermeneutics. So going beyond the mainstream, a small number of the market mainstream which dominated the national record, which did not represent the full picture. So, on a national scale, a handful of well-marketed films are widely recognized, casting a shadow over a far more diverse film industry. Indian film industries, independent short films of the easy to consider largely accounted for in legitimizing the prospects. So, works like CTR, Yashida, Carnival Story, Anupur, Taki, which is related to short film, which is a essentially part of less recognized for I mean, these are films which are aired, short films, these are on TV releases, these are available freely on YouTube, experiments by untraded grades most of the times, just made a movie, but not recognized because not released on commercial channels like PBR and etc. So, the point that the presentation wants to make is while the prospects lie in reclaiming India's native science fiction imagination rather than continuing to mimic the modern forms, the limitations are there. The limitations are aiming or going for a kind of mainstream, get into a mainstream popular mindset to quickly cater to young minds and sell movies, which hinders the growth of science fiction as a critical sort of helps in taking thoughts forward, not just taking industry forward, taking critical thoughts forward. So on this note, I will try my presentation now. I hope I have tried to justify in very short what has been hindering the growth of Indian science fiction cinema as a whole, and how we can perhaps look into manufacturing cinema, which is our goal and not following what is already given us, not always looking up, but at times looking parallelly into the society, at times looking inside our own dreams, at times going into the depths of humanity and our experiences from the point of view of a nation that's grown after its own self, after enormous struggles, and humanity continues to be in crisis and protocols. And as our science fiction is always there as part of us. Thank you so much for your patience.
Thank you very much, Ms. Neha ma'am. Thank you very much for your presentation. As you mentioned that it is a microscopic view, and it was really a wonderful and informative talk. Thank you very much. Now we will move for the next presentation. Thank you very much, Neha ma'am, for your informative presentation. As you stated, it was a microscopic view, And really, it was informative talk. I must congratulate for your presentation, and I wish you all the best. Now we can move for the next presentations.
Chair of today's session, distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen. I am highly honored to receive the invitation to discuss science fiction in Assamese language. I extend my sincere thanks to the organizers of 26th Annual Science Fiction Conference, which is also 11th International Science Fiction Conference. I must thank Indian Association for Science Fiction Studies for providing me this opportunity. At the outset, I must confess that while trying to draw a picture of science fiction in the Assamese language, this may not be able to represent all commendable works of Assamese science fiction. Even though the writing of science topics in the Assamese can be traced to a few centuries back, modern Assamese science writing started emerging in an organized form with the advent of American Baptist missionaries in the mid-19th century through their regular publication Orunodoy. To unfold the fascinating journey of Assamese science fiction, which has been enriched by a number of commendable works, let's go back to 1937, when the first science fiction story Bisotiar Deh, a satirical and a humorous one, written by Hariprasad Barua, appeared in the magazine Abahan. In this story, the protagonist arrived on the planet Jupiter after his death and continues to reside there. Referring to the customs on the planet, the writer seems to delineate some inadequacies of human society. However, it was all in a dream caused by the bits of hemp. Before this, work with science fiction qualities was published in 1914 by Ambikagiri Raichaudhuri, who painted a futuristic scenario in his article Jagator Heh Adarho or Biswa Shanti Sthapanar Path, the ultimate ideal of mankind and the path to the world peace. He discussed the possibility of space travel and the organ transplants in this article. It must be mentioned that during this time, science education in Assam was hardly more than elementary, yet we find work of extraordinary merit concerning the time. We better stop the treatment. We want to bring his youth back. Why should he be a child again? The monk had a great look at the old man and said, "We have arrived at a good discovery. It's great." The doctor too was elated. They have targeted youth and now it seemed possible to regain childhood. It was a remarkable achievement. The excerpt is from the second science fiction story, Rahayan Chemistry, by Nagendranath Chaudhary, published in 1938, and was based on traditional Kayakal treatment. In this story, the writer discussed the improvement of ancient medicine through modern science, which applied to give youth to adults. In a humorous and satirical, a qualified physician guided by a monk applied Kayakal treatment to an old man, but in the process, the old man becomes a boy. The unconventional story element, lucidity of the narrative, and the progress of the concept were so intricately interwoven that it kept readers captive till the end, and these qualities make the story the finest one. Komudeswar Borthakur, a renowned figure in the library movement in Assam, wrote a detective novel, Atom Bomba, in 1946. It's Atom Bomb. The story stands out as one of the enriching the Assamese science fiction, which was about the plan to make an atom bomb near Guwahati with raw materials from nearby. It is interesting to note that uranium was discovered in Meghalaya later. Post-independence time, a few mainstream writers contributed immensely towards the growth of science fiction. A few of these Sahitya Akademi award-winning authors also written a number of science fiction. Saurav Kumar Soliha, one of the most powerful narrators of modern Assamese short stories, in his story Awaz, which was published in 1950, reflected the onslaught of modern technology in our lives and the effects of noise pollution on our brain and heart. The story subtly conveys that in the age of technology, the ultimate winner will be human sensibility. Dr. Bhavendranath Saikia wrote a very well-crafted story, Gahwar, The Cave, in 1968. This was after the first successful heart transplant. The writer links heart transplant with the issue of apartheid, wherein the heart of one recently married black young man, Smith, was transplanted in the white elderly person, Mr. Pina. The complex storyline portrays the inner world of characters, the deeper truth of life, in the age-defining success of medical science. Namakanta Borua's novel Aparatha, Antimatter, is based on a high level of scientific theory and its possible outcome. Seeking to make a symbiosis of surgery and biophysics, the protagonist attempts to invent an innovative technology to make bloodless operation, and in the end, he invents a destructive power, antimatter. Poet Hare Deka also made a meaningful contribution with the novel Agantuk, Visitor, in 2008. Assamese science fiction literature reached a new height with the recognition of Saraswati Samman in 2008 to the work of Dr. Lakshminandan Bora, his novel is Kaikalp. The novel is based on traditional Kaikalp treatment and is a best example of science with a human appeal. This is a rare new theme on a huge canvas where science and humanity coexist. The irrepressible desire of humans to be young adds an expeditiousness to the story. One of the pioneers of science fiction, Vijay Krishna Dev Sharma, published first science fiction story April 1, 2466 in 1963. His first science fiction novel, Chandralokat Patham Manu, First Man on the Lunar Surface, was based on lunar expedition. Another novel, Tuloki Tole Migopohusore, Dear Graze Under Black Basil, is an exciting journey to the moon. Dev Sharma published more than 50 stories in newspapers, periodicals, and also radio broadcasts. Dr. Dinesh Chandra Goswami made immense contribution in Assamese science fiction literature with more than 100 science fiction stories, including 9 anthologies, 11 science fiction novels, including 2 for children, and thus played a leading role in the development of this branch of literature. He arrived at the center to popularize science fiction with the publication of anthology Bhadratamapak Janto, The Etiquette Meter, in 1985. His anthologies are Portable Smell Observer, Like a Wave, Identical Hearts, The Fictional World, The Internal Flow, The Virtual Realities of a New Century, Green Feelings, and many more. He has enriched the Assamese literature with his immense contribution. National Book Trust has published his anthology Dinesh Chandra Goswami Swanibarshito Galpo. Undoubtedly, Dinesh Chandra Goswami, through his original ideas, futuristic approach to science, lucid description, enormous narrative skill, and creative imagination, has taken Assamese science fiction to a new height. Santanu Tamuli's first story, He Chandra Biday, Goodbye Moon, published in 1964, is about an accident faced by a space explorer team while returning from the moon. His anthology, Mayamigo, Mirage, includes 8 stories that have literary appeal, commingled with lucid description and curiosity till the end. Apart from his contribution as a writer, Tamuli, as an editor of 2 most popular children's magazines, Mochak and Notun Aviskar, has provided a platform for science writing and has been playing a pivotal role in the growth of science fiction by mentoring new writers. Another noteworthy contributor, Abhijit Sharma Barua, has published nearly 100 stories, including stories for children. His stories, simple yet humorous narratives, cater to all classes of readers. He deals with the subject in a very simple manner and transcend from the ordinary to extraordinary, and thus can captivate the readers through the entire story and succeed in defining a new taste. Bandita Fukan, the first first woman mechanical engineer from Assam, an author of more than 100 books, has undoubtedly made a remarkable contribution to science fiction. Her first anthology, Ditiya Vyakti, the second person, was published in 1991. She wrote a few novels, including novels for children. Fukan's varied topics include the present and future, the earth and the cosmos, other planets and stars, the extraterrestrials, robots, and cloned creatures. Her stories have been translated into other Indian languages. Ranju Hazarika, the doyen of detective and thriller, who with more than 700 books to his credit, has contributed immensely to the genre. He has created a record with nearly 70 science fiction books, including 40 for children. He takes the readers to a completely different world through his beautiful narrative and lucid description. The fantasy series Jason and Pawan, with tales of his conflict between mankind and the ETs and the superhumans heroics, have mesmerized the children for more than 2 decades. Dr. Jayanta Kumar Goswami and Dr. Mihir Kumar Goswami, both medical professionals, have etched their places with science fiction story, especially subjects from the field of medical science. Dr. Jayanta Kumar Goswami's story have been included in the middle school textbook. In Dr. Mihir Kumar Goswami's stories, the readers discerned a happy symbiosis of medical science and psychology. Dr. Debisaran Thakur's novel Mahapasthanar Pathat, Towards the Great Demise, is built on the probable gene change behind the rise of terrorist activities and degeneration of human value. Dr. Padmapani's Hartik is a fantasy aimed at juvenile readers where a wristwatch called Hartik lets one know the inner world of individuals. Amulya Kumar Hazarika's Akraman, The Attack, Handhan, The SARS, and two meaningful contributions to the science fiction. The story of Akraman is based on a breed of fighter ants created through genetic engineering, and Sandhan is based on handiwork of vastly superior creatures uh, purpose, whose sole purpose is to destroy this human society and control the earth. Shakil Jamil's Nila Nila Medana, the Blue Melancholy, shows how wrong application of DNA realignment technology can do havoc to human. Santanu Tamuli's story Root Ducks and Deepak Chandra Borua's novel Sunset in Caldera able to capture COVID-19 through science fiction. Bikram Majindar Borua's science fiction stories, Dipankar Malla Borua's Divine Code, Narendranath Chaudhary's Anya Grahar Khabar, Jibanjyoti Bordoloi's Ishwar are a few noteworthy contributions. Many writers have written for science fiction for children and adults in Assamese. Rachindranath Goswami's novel for children, Kinkinir Bidroh, Revolt of Robots, portrays a robot society and its impact on humankind and touches the issues like technology and the environment and the exploitation and fair practices. Goswami's novel Pualmoni or Sising or Du Hahokik Abhijan is based on a character Sising who performs various adventures after a brain-computer interface implant named Pualmoni. Children literature is enriched by few noteworthy contributions from Indrakanta Karki, Jugal Losan Das, Birendra Dev Sharma, and many others. Playwright Arun Sharma's play Sthavar, Immovable, is recognized as the first play with science fiction essence. The radio play portrays the tremendous development of science and technology in our society. The contribution of renowned dramatist Shema Prasad Sharma is also worth mentioning here, who, through his prominent dramas such as Devotar Anyarup, Biswas, Trust, Shubhotrapat, Auspicious Beginning, Mamatar Mahakabya, Mamata's Epic, Dumuza, Confusion, Shekh Ashroy, The Last Shelter, etc., enrich the realm of science fiction. His play Devatar Aindarup, Another Face of God, is widely regarded as the first authentic science fiction drama in Assamese. Dinesh Chandra Goswami made a meaningful contribution through more than 40 science fiction radio plays. His plays have been broadcast in various Indian languages by All India Radio. Jayantamanap Robot, written by Prabhat Goswami, is the first science fiction stage play in Assamese and depicts how a scientist created a machine man devoid of humanity and concern is of normal human beings. A few writers, including Sushil Goswami, Amarjyoti Chaudhary, have also written science fiction plays. Science fiction in the Assamese is enriched by two anthologies, both edited by Santanu Tamoli. The first one, Ohomia Kalpabigyan Galpo Hankalan, and the English translation is Homo Minuscula. This has been published by Sahitya Academy. This is the first anthology in Assamese with 21 stories and was attempted to reflect the astounding variety of Assamese science fiction. The preface of the book is a valuable edition that has captured the journey of science fiction with special reference to Assamese. Another anthology, Potimimbo, a collection of 12 stories for teenagers, was published by Assam Science Writers Association. These anthologies have strengthened the foundation of science fiction and are sure to keep the readers enthralled through the fantastic images and scenes created by the selected authors. Science fiction in Assam is enriched by the translation of various works in Indian world literature. Assamese newspaper and periodicals have been playing a major role in the growth of science fiction. It must be mentioned that the digest magazine Bismoy has played a major role in popularizing science fiction in Assamese. Keeping pace with the advancement of science and technology, science fiction attained a new dimension. From space exploration to robot, the cyber world, cyber crime, extinction, ET and aliens, space travel, quantum physics, environment, biological attacks, various topics of medical science, genetic engineering and cloning, nanotechnology, and many other evolving topics have been included. Of late, artificial intelligence has entered the domain in Assamese science fiction. Before I sign off, there are few concerns. Reading habits is a media-saturated environment, the fast-changing digital world, the rapid dwindling of language, leadership, etc. are a few challenges at present. I am sure that many new writers, including women writers, will make immense contribution and publisher will come forward to work in unison to make the journey of science fiction a more memorable and beautiful one. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everybody. First of all, let me thank the organizers of the 26th Annual and 11th International Science Fiction and Techno-Fiction Conference being organized by the Indian Association for Science Fiction Studies, Bangalore, and Krishnasamy College of Engineering and Technology, Cuddalore, Tamil Nadu, for their kind invitation. I am particularly indebted to Dr. Srinarahari, Secretary General, IASFS, for providing me with this rare opportunity to participate in this conference. It is heartening to note that the conference is dedicated to the theme of Indian science fiction, yesterday, today, and tomorrow. In my presentation, I would like to share my findings on imagining the cosmos in Punjabi, the evolution of science fiction. I have divided my today's lecture into 6 sections: abstract, introduction, science fiction writings, translation works, conclusions, and references. Science fiction writing in Punjabi began in 1980s. Only a few science fiction books and translation works have been published to date. Currently, a new vigor has been observed. Role of various government agencies, institutions, and NGOs are reported in my paper. Role of mass media is also described. It is concluded that science fiction writing in Punjabi is still in its infancy. More concentrated efforts are needed to develop this field of literature. Talking about the background about the Punjabi language, Punjabi emerged as an independent language in 11th century. Baba Farid, his sloks and hymns during the 13th century were written in Punjabi language. Golden period of Punjabi literature happened during 1469 to 1708 AD. Most of the religious and mystic poetry of the period is preserved in the Adi Granth, which is presently called Shri Guru Granth Sahib. During 1600 to 1800 AD, many works of Sanskrit literature, Ramayana, Mahabharata, Bhagavad Gita, and Upanishads were translated into Punjabi. Mughal Raj, Sikh Raj, or British Empire period, Punjabi did not get official patronage. The official language of the state was either Urdu or English. Punjabi was accorded the status of state language in 1966 on the creation of Punjabi Suba. During the last 60 years, it has shown vigorous development in almost all branches of literature. For the empowerment of the common man, scientific knowledge needs to be communicated in the language of the masses. The Punjabi language has awakened to this need only recently. The present situation is very encouraging. The popular science writing in Punjabi are mostly in prose form. Currently, a few Punjabi writers have published their work in science fiction genre too. When science fiction writing started in Punjabi language, some scholars claim that Kissa Shah Bhairam by Imam Baksh, published in the early 19th century, was the beginning of science fiction writing in Punjabi. The protagonist of the Kissa can become invisible, but there is no mention of the scientific basis of this invisibility. So it does not meet the definition of science fiction outlined by the eminent science fiction writer Isaac Asimov. As Asimov said, science fiction must involve itself with science and technology, at least tangentially. It must deal with a society noticeably different from the real one of its time, and their difference must involve some change in the level of science and technology. If this is so, science fiction can't predate popular awareness of the connection between advancing science and technology and change. According to the above definition, Kissa Shah Bhairam can't be termed as a work of science fiction, rather it's a fantasy, as it is characterized by a highly fanciful or supernatural elements. Some science fiction writers and their works, especially short stories and anthologies, which have been published in Punjabi language over the previous 3 decades. Amandeep Singh of USA, he belongs to village Nora in Punjab. He wrote a first anthology of science fiction stories, Chutde Taaryan Di Dasta, in 1989, and later on, Sitaron Se Aage, 2022, second book on the science fiction stories he has authored. Amarjit Kaur Pannu wrote a very long science fiction story, Termi Santan, in her book Sucha Gulab in 2022. Amarjit Singh of Canada wrote a book, Chip De Andar, in 1997. There are 3 science fiction stories, Chip De Andar, Ek Din Tarti Da, or Kali Badli. Myself, from Canada, I have authored a few books for children. First book which I edited, that is Awake the Pad. It was published in 2003, and Samay De Behan in 2022, Tarti Ye Ruk Ja, a book for the children in 1995, Nami Tarti Name Akash, 2022, Kepler Gray De Ajab Shinde and Patkan. These are the long science fiction stories in 2018, and about a dozen of science fiction stories were published in Shahmukhi Punjabi in Pekeru magazine of Pakistan during 2016 to 22. Rupinder Pal Dhillon of UK wrote science fiction stories Kaldar and Vikas in his anthology print in 2011, Dunga Pani and Jupiter the Murdagar in 2021. Jasveer Singh Dedargar wrote an anthology on environmental stories titled as Pavan Guru Panipita in 2019. Tipu S. Makhdoom, Pakistan, wrote Machini Yathru, a long story in 2019. Sorry. Ajmer Sidhu wrote a few science fiction story cover which Dafan Hazar Vare, Dilli de Kingre, Dinosaur, Anne Sujake, and the Lenins from the Clone Valley in various of his short story anthology, which were published in 2013, 2004, and 2019. And some of the title of these books are being shown side by side on each slide. Recently, science fiction writing, long novels, also has come into picture that many writers have started writing science fiction novels. Gurnaam Garewal of England wrote Dartistan in 2008. Jasveer Rana of India wrote Registan Dista Hai in 2017. Harjeet Singh of India wrote a science fiction novel for children, Sachi Muchi, Muchi in 2020. Rupinder Pal Dhillon of UK wrote a Sindbad 2021. Myself wrote a Corona Young the Hero in 2022 for children, a small novel for the young children. And Gurchan Kaurtind from India wrote two novels, one in 2013 and another in 2021, Chandrayaan, Tishkin, and Mission Red Star. A latest addition to this genre is by Amanpreet Singh Man of India, wrote 360 Degree in 2022, this novel, which is based on the mathematical description of a phenomena. So some of the novel, their titles are being shown on the right side of this slide. Science fiction plays and other media. Takshil Society of India wrote Te Dev Push Har Gaye, science fiction novel 1995. Myself wrote Ruk Manukh Te Vatavaran 2007, Satrangi Ping Te Ho Natak in 2019, which were published from Lahore, Pakistan, and Tarti Maa Bimar Hai Te Ho Natak 2021, which were published in India. Mandeep Singh Aujla wrote Aab in 2013. And another interesting development is that science fiction film have also started being produced in Punjabi language. Redua was the first science fiction movie which was published, which was released in 2018, and Redua returns in the second sequel to the first movie. It was released in 2024. The director of these movies, Nab Bajpa from India, and some of the titles of the plays, books of plays are shown on the right side, and at the bottom, the poster for the radio movie and radio returns are being shown. Translation works. B.S. Batra of India translator George Gamo's Mr. Tumpkin explores the atom in 1973. It was published by Punjab State University Textbook Board, Chandigarh. Gulwant Farag of India translated The Legend of Planet Surprise, authored by Tajima Shinji in 1993. It was published by Sahitya Akademi, New Delhi. Karanjit Singh of India translated Balfond Gaze, It Happened Tomorrow in 1995, published by National Book Trust of India. Myself translated stories of 12 national level science fiction writers into Punjabi, and that book was edited by me, and the title of the book is Pavik the Pad, published by Singh Brothers Amritsar. Similarly, Mollusca Press of England translated a few classical science fiction novels of Western writers like H.G. Wells' Time Machine and The Island of Dr. Moreau, Edgar Rice Burroughs' A Princess of Mars, and Edwin A. Abbott's novel Flatland in 2019. So translation from other language in Punjabi is being done, and this domain is being developed slowly. If we analyze what is happening in science fiction domain of Punjabi language, most of the Punjabi science fiction stories takes us on a voyage through alien worlds, a high-tech future with advanced robots and flying cars. Some other Punjabi science fiction writings describe interstellar travels, alien contacts, intelligent yet emotional robots, dangers of asteroids, interplanetary romance, and terrorism. The impact of virtual reality on human society, the ill effects of environmental pollution, human cloning, and nuclear war are the other issues taken up by these writers. In most of these science fiction tales, the authors have kept the warmth of love and human emotion at the heart of all these stories to tingle curiosity and imagination among children. A few books containing science fiction have also been published for children. These top on the right side, top title is of a book by Amandeep Singh, Sitariyan To Agge, and the lower title is of the environmental story by Jasveer Singh Didargarh, and the middle one is my book written for the children, Taktiye Ruk Ja, science fiction stories. Most of the Punjabi newspaper like Daily Ajit, Punjabi Tribune, Desavik, published from India, and Punjabi Daily and Pravasi Weekly newspaper published from Canada, and Punjab Times newspaper published from USA. And magazine like X, Samkali Sahit, Nirantar Soj, Pankhadiyan from India, and Pokheru from Pakistan. They are publishing various science fiction stories time to time, and their contribution is worth appreciation for publishing the science fiction works. Punjabi readers' interest in science fiction is on the rise. Concluding today's lecture, I would like to say science fiction writing in Punjabi language is still in its infancy. Much more effort is needed in this field to enrich the language in this genre. Writers and publishers must focus their attention in this field to enhance the language. Government organizations, NGOs, and private publishers must continue their help and encouragement to science fiction writers of Punjabi by organizing writing workshop as well as publishing and promoting their work. So writing workshops are needed, grants from the government for publication in this field, and support by various publishers is the need of the hour. Here are some of the references which I've used for today's presentation. And in the end, a brief introduction about myself. I am a science writer by choice and teacher by profession, a physicist. I love to write stories about science and environment to tingle the curiosity of my readers. Beside my science fiction writing in Punjabi, my various science fiction stories appeared in Science Reporter, Science India Alive, Women's Era Identity, Sastra, Mithila Review, and PC Children's Magazine from India, Tasawwur, and otherwise engaged and Rodan from USA. These magazines are Azadi Kulshra from Romania and Pakheru from Pakistan. I am author of 2 anthologies of science fiction stories for general readers and 6 science fiction books for children. Presently, I live in Mississauga, Ontario, Canada. Thank you very much. Thanks for listening.
Namaskar. I am Dr. Neela Mingule. Today's topic of my discussion is Marathi science fiction across time. Before we begin, let me ask you a simple question. How many of us checked our phones within the first 10 minutes of waking up today? Most of us probably did. We use technology to communicate, navigate, teach, learn, shop, and even monitor our health. In many ways, technology is no longer just a tool. It has become the environment in which we live. And that brings us to an interesting realization. This technology, to be used or not to be used, that is not the question anymore. That decision has already been made. Technology is inevitable. The real question is, how will it change us? How will it reshape our understanding of what it means to be human? Today, I would like to take you on a journey through the evolution of Marathi science fiction or Vijnan Katha. It is a journey that reveals how Marathi writers have engaged with scientific progress, not merely to predict the future, but to understand the humanity itself. The main argument of this study is that Marathi science fiction is not merely an imitation of Western science fiction, it has its own unique history, roots, and identity. At the same time, the development of Marathi science fiction was not always smooth. For a long period, the genre grew slowly. Low literacy rates, a predominantly agrarian society, and the delayed impact of industrialization meant that scientific thinking took time to become part of everyday life. There was also a certain fear of science and technology, a belief that scientific creations might ultimately become a threat to humanity, much like the fears reflected in the story of Frankenstein. Yet, Marathi science fiction writers persisted. They used stories not only to entertain but also to make science accessible to ordinary readers. They transformed complex ideas from space exploration to astrophysics into engaging narrative that sparked curiosity and wonder. By doing so, Marathi science fiction has played an important role in developing a scientific temper while also encouraging readers to think critically about the society they live in. Understanding this evolution helps us appreciate how a regional language can become a powerful medium for discussing science and the future. To understand why this genre matters, we need to think about the role of regional languages. People connect most naturally with ideas expressed in their own language. Science, when presented only through technical terms and complex theories, can sometimes feel distant or intimidating. But when the same ideas are woven into an interesting story, they become easier to understand and much more engaging. This is exactly what many Marathi science fiction writers achieved. They used storytelling as a bridge between science and ordinary readers. They understood that science fiction cannot survive on scientific facts alone. What makes a story memorable is how science affects people, their relationship, and the society. By combining scientific ideas with human experiences, Marathi writers helped create stories that were both thought provoking and accessible to the wider audience. When we talk about science fiction in India, its roots go much deeper than modern era. Long before spaceships, robots, or artificial intelligence became part of science fiction literature, Indian stories were already filled with ideas that pushed the boundaries of imagination. The great epics, the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, describe flying vehicles like the Pushpak Viman, powerful weapons such as the Agnestra, and other extraordinary technologies that, from a modern perspective, can remind us of concepts often explored in science fiction. Of course, these texts are not science fiction in the modern sense. They are better understood as what scholars call proto-science fiction stories that encourage people to imagine worlds beyond their immediate reality. Much like contemporary science fiction asks us to imagine interplanetary travel or AI, these ancient narratives invited readers to think about possibilities that seemed impossible in their own time. In the Marathi tradition, the roots of this imaginative spirit can be traced back to the 13th century. During the time of saints like Gnaneshwar and Eknath, Works such as Jnaneshwari and Marathi retellings of the epics familiarize readers with extraordinary events, miraculous journeys, and world beyond ordinary experience. While these works were religious and philosophical rather than scientific, they helped create a culture that was open to wonder. In many ways, they prepared a ground for later science fiction writers who would replace miracles with scientific explanations, but continue to ask the same timeless question: what lies beyond the limits of our current knowledge? The emergence of true Marathi science fiction began around the turn of the 20th century. A major boost came in 1898 when the Maharaja of Baroda, Sayajirao Gaikwad, announced a prize of rupees 3,000 for good Marathi writing. This led to a surge in publication. Between 1820 and 1900, thousands of Marathi books, around 4,700, were published, many focusing on science and new ideas. However, most of these early works were informative, like explanations of diseases or biographies of scientists rather than imaginative fiction. The real change began when writers shifted from simply explaining science to imagining it. Instead of only describing discoveries, they started asking, what if science changed everyday life in unexpected ways? This is where science fiction begins to emerge. Similar to early global works like H.G. Wells' The Time Machine, where time travel reshapes our understanding of history, or The War of the Worlds, where alien invasion becomes a way to question human survival. The real evolution came when writers began asking not just what is science, but how does science change human life? With this, Marathi science fiction slowly moved towards a more mature phase, setting the stage for the later golden age of imaginative and socially aware storytelling. The evidence building on the foundations laid in the late 19th century, the evidence of Marathi science fiction's growth becomes tangible in early 20th century. The first true Marathi science fiction story is widely considered to be S.B. Ranede's Tareche Hasya, The Laughter of a Cable, which was published in 1911. Ranade followed this with Radium in 1916, experimenting with futuristic concepts long before they were grounded in hard scientific rigor. Other notable pre-independence work included T.R. Devgirikar's 2018, which was written in 1923, which offered a futuristic vision of the world, and N.V. Koglekar's Mrityu Kiran in 1936. The methodology of the genre underwent a drastic shift after independence. The post-independence era was characterized by rapid innovations in science, technology, and society. The pivotal pioneer of this period was B.R. Bhagwat, who published Udti Tabakdi, Flying Saucer, in 1965. While primarily known for children's literature, Bhagwat brought the concept of extraterrestrial life to mainstream Marathi readers, effectively broadening the demographic for speculative stories. Simultaneously, Narayan Tharap, a chemical engineer, began writing science fiction and horror, contributing 20 books to the genre. However, the golden age of Marathi science fiction truly arrived in 1970s, and the catalyst was institutional. The Marathi Vignan Parishad. It is in Mumbai. It began conducting annual science fiction story competitions. This incubator was revolutionary because it attracted actual practicing scientists to the genre. As a result, the nature of science fiction in Marathi began to change. Instead of purely imaginative or fantasy like space opera stories, writers started producing more hard science fiction. Stories based on real principles of physics, biology, astronomy. The science in these stories was not just decorative, it was accurate and meaningful. This shift also proved something very important. Scientifically grounded fiction could still be popular and engaging. It showed that Marathi readers were ready for stories that combine imagination with real science, and that such writing could succeed both critically and commercially. One of the most important figures of this era is Dr. Jayant Narlikar, a world renowned astrophysicist. Narikar played a key role in making science fiction accessible to common readers through his debut collection Yakshachi Dengi, 1979. What makes his writing special is the way he localizes science fiction. He sets complex scientific ideas in familiar Indian contexts and often blends them with subtle mythological references. For example, in stories like the Ice Age comet, he imagines an extreme global climate crisis affecting places like Mumbai, bringing a worldwide catastrophe into a very local, relatable setting. This makes the science feel immediate and real, rather than distant or abstract. Narikar believed that science fiction should be based on real science, extended logically into possible futures. In works such as Vaman Paratnala and Virus, he often highlights the limits of human knowledge and shows how societies may face unexpected cultural shocks when science advances faster than human readiness. Through his stories, he not only popularized hard science fiction in Marathi, but also reminded readers that scientific progress always comes with social and human consequences. Dr. Bar Fonke, a nuclear biologist, became a massive pillar of the genre. Fonke's stories often explore the emotional and psychological impacts of modern science, particularly in biology and robotics. He is perhaps best known nationally for editing the 1993 anthology It Happened Tomorrow, which brought Marathi and other Indian regional science fiction to a global audience. Fonke observed that the development of the genre in Marathi followed four distinct stages, beginning with adventure-filled fairy tales, moving to a balance of science and imagination, then to a focus on social issues post-World War II, and finally to a stage where style and form took precedence. Lakshman Lunde is celebrated for thought-provoking stories like Einstein II, which explores the ethical implications of cloning a genius's brain. Niranjan Ghate, who authored over 100 books, became a staple of the genre, exploring robotics, futuristic dystopias, and societal shifts in works like Space Jack and Superman. Subodh Zavdekar specialized in integrating future technologies and artificial intelligence into the context of Marathi middle class life. The evidence shows that these writers moved beyond pure science to explore the interaction between technology and human life. This movement was sustained not just by novels but by Maharashtra's unique Diwali Anka tradition, special festival magazine issues that provided a significant amount of space for science fiction stories for over 110 years. This decentralized publishing model allowed writers like Dr. Sanjay Dhole, Dr. Ashish Mahabar, and Sudha Risbud to reach a vast audience, exploring everything from recorded plant memories to quantum encryptions. Numerous emerging writers are contributing the growth and visibility of the genre through their initiative. As the genre matured, it began to attract diverse perspective, moving from a male-dominated hard science focus to broader psychological and ecological concerns. This transition is marked by the significant contribution of women writers who brought fresh lenses to the narrative. The impact of the Marathi science fiction movement has been multidimensional, influencing development, social consciousness, and the broader landscape of Indian literature. One of the most significant shifts in the modern era has been the restoration of women's voices within the genre. While early science fiction was often a dominated genre that used science as a mode of power and domination, women writers have perceived scientific truth as a means of reconstructing and empowering society. Authors like Shubhada Gokte, Meghashri Darvi, Dr. Madhuri Shanbag, and Smita Potnis have nuanced the genre by exploring the intersection of advanced technology and human psychology. Shubhada Gokte's story, Birthright, and her work Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam deal with complex biological, ethical, and settlement questions. Meghashri Darvi, a prominent contemporary voice, often explores astrophysics and the human psyche. Smita Potnis talks about cloning, human memory, consciousness, neuroscience, digital twin, time travel, and time loops. These writers have led readers on a journey from darkness to light, using thought experimentation to address sensitive societal issues. The remarkable thing is, no women science fiction writers have adopted an explicitly feminist stance in their narratives. The emotional turmoil experienced by their characters is not portrayed as something exclusive to women. Rather, it represents a fundamental human struggle. Science recognizes no distinctions, including gender difference. Furthermore, the genre has expanded its reach into other media. Science fiction has been broadcast on radio since the creation of Science Cells in 1976 and staged in theaters through one-act play competitions supported by MVP and the government of Maharashtra. Even television has embraced the genre with dramas like Guinea Pig in Marathi. Marathi science fiction has grown from mythical roots to modern speculative writing, showing strong creative development. However, it faces key challenges such as weak critical review due to limited scientific understanding among critics. Additionally, language barriers across Indian sci-fi communities limit exchange of ideas, which makes translation between regional languages essential. Overall, the genre has great potential but needs broader themes, stronger criticism, and better cross language collaboration. Looking forward, the future, Marathi science fiction can be seen in the spirit of Arthur C. Clarke's Childhood's End, a narrative where humanity moves from fragmented identities toward a collective evolutionary consciousness. The goal is to establish one India, one voice in science fiction, a direction where indigenous works reflect our unique history and way of life while engaging with global trends. Whether through magazine, journal, special issues, online discussions, or the rigorous academic study of this genre at the university level, Marathi science fiction continues to thrive. It remains committed to the betterment of humanity through science. Ultimately, science fiction comes first to ignite the imagination, and reality follows in its wake. Thank you.
Respected dignitaries, distinguished guests, and science fiction writers, I'm Savita Srinivas, science fiction writer and an IPS officer from Bengaluru. Today I will be covering the topic Kannada science fiction, a recap of the past. It is a privilege to stand before you today and speak about a fascinating, often overlooked domain of literature, that is Kannada science fiction. Science fiction, as we know, is not merely about imagination. It is a bridge between dreams and discovery, between what is known and what could be. Across the world, science fiction has inspired innovation, predicted the future, and questioned the limits of human understanding. But what is truly remarkable is that India and especially Kannada literature has been engaging with such ideas for centuries. If we take up the ancient roots of scientific imagination, long before modern science fiction took shape, Indian epics like the Ramayana and Mahabharata hinted at concepts such as flying machines, cloning, and remote viewing. Similarly, in Kannada literature, as early as the 10th century, we see glimpses of scientific imagination. In Karnataka Kadambari, preservation of a human body in ice is described. In Shivakotyacharya's Vadharadhane, comprising a story of Vidyut Chora Rishi, explores ideas of invisibility and transformation, concepts that would later appear in global science fiction. Vidyut Chora learns Taskara art forms and could change his form. By using an ointment, that is Anjana, he could either appear or disappear at any place, any time. We can recall that H.G. Wells' novel, The Invisible Man, published in 1897, which has the concept of appearing and disappearing. These works blur the line between fantasy and proto-science fiction, showing that curiosity about science and the future has deep cultural roots. The beginning of modern Kannada science fiction. The modern era of Kannada science fiction began in 1928 with renowned writer Dr. K. Shivram Karant's story Pashubala, which is said to be the first modern science fiction story in Kannada. The story takes the readers to planet Mercury, where human characters interact with alien life. But beyond space travel, it reflects on human morality, greed, and ethics. Dr. Shivram Karant has also written Mangala Grahakke Ota, meaning run to planet Mars. Soon after, a short story, Miss 1954 by Koradkal Srinivasa Rao explored artificial insemination and ethical dilemmas. Samvela, the key character, comes in contact with his own offspring. When he tries to have a relationship with his own offspring, he comes to know the truth, which was a shocking revelation. Coming to novels, Kalayana, written by Bharati Sutta, which was published in 1947, is the first Kannada science fiction novel. And it introduced time travel, imagining future societies, technology, and social structures. Though it was influenced by H.G. Wells' Time Machine book, there are independent imaginative descriptions too. These early works show that Kannada writers were not just imagining technology, they were exploring its impact on humanity. The Golden Era, Rise of Visionary Writers. A major turning point came in the 1960s with Professor Rajshekhar Bhusramat, fondly known as Rabu. He can truly be called the pioneer who popularized science fiction in Kannada. His first science fiction short story, Tachirama, was published in Mayura Monthly magazine in 1965. When the concept of 3D films were still non-existent, his story depicted how the ghost on the screen could touch the viewers. Professor Rajshekhar Bhusramat's contributions include stories about space travel, robots and aliens, creation of superhero-like characters such as Zion and Robon, exploration of futuristic ideas like machine brains, interplanetary life, and recording human thoughts. His novel, Operation UFO, was written even before humans landed on the moon, showing extraordinary foresight. Rabu's work combined scientific curiosity, adventure, and philosophy. And most importantly, it made science fiction accessible and exciting for readers, including children. In 1977, 10 of his books were published at once. His children's works have been highly popular, amongst which is Nalina Makkala Kategalu, meaning stories for tomorrow's children. The series has common characters Papu, Baby, and their dog Moti, whose adventures carry them to different worlds. The titles are Robot Town, Relativity Town, Atomic Town, Under the Sea, On Mars, Micro World, Energy Town, Land of the Lost, and Rainbow Land. Diverse voices and expanding themes. Following Rabu, many writers enriched Kannada science fiction with unique perspectives. Sarita Gnanananda explored endocrinology and human development, blending science with philosophy in a science fiction novel, Paripurna, published in 1973. The thymus gland, which shrinks when a person grows to become an adult, was still retained, and how its secretion, hyperthymus, affects the physical development and its brain is beautifully depicted through the characters. Nalini Murthy addressed atomic warfare, robotics, and future societies, reflecting global concerns in her collection published posthumously titled Sahitya Vijnana Sankirna in 2003. It comprised of 11 SF stories. Hashi Bhairanetti highlighted the dangers of unchecked scientific advancement. Through his SF short stories collection, Violet Manava, which was brought out in 1975, it tries to send a message that as science grows and new inventions are made by humans, there are still incidents leading to mishaps. In his SF novella, Triplet Sigma, brought out in 1980, contact is made with aliens of other planets, which have emotions. His another SF short stories collection, Top Secret, carries a message regarding incorporating the scientific phenomena in life in an appropriate manner. In the later days, the writer focused on including science in social themes rather than creating science fiction. These writers shifted focus from pure imagination to ethical and societal questions. The questions are: what happens when science goes too far? How do we balance progress with responsibility? Science meets society and philosophy. Kannada science fiction is unique because it often blends science with philosophy and culture. For example, P.N. Rangan, who used to write under his pen name Manu, in his magnum opus work Mahasamparka, which came out in 2002, meaning Great Connect, reinterprets the Mahabharata through a scientific lens, suggesting extraterrestrial influence and advanced technology in ancient times. He has relied his work on Swiss philosopher Erich von Daniken's Chariots of the Gods and Return of the Stars, which came out in the 60s. The author, while presenting his argument, states that when an item or a subject has to be conceptualized, there should have been some foundation previous to that. Likewise, knowledge and progress goes stage by stage. If it comes suddenly, it creates doubts that it could have come from some place or that person might have learnt elsewhere, etc. During the period when the Great Connect happened, probably in 3100 BC, it was also the period of Mahabharata. Manu's other works include Mahaprasthana and Sudarshana Chakra, which was published in 1984. Y.S. Lewis, author of Akashagange, explores alien civilizations, space travel, and human emotions, emphasizing peace and coexistence. In the vast, unimaginable universe, there could be another life force thriving somewhere, and there could be people, animals, and also plants. Based on an imagination to this possibility of intelligent beings in other planets, the storyline has been woven. These works remind us that science fiction is not just about machines, it is about meaningful existence and the human condition. Modern Kannada science fiction expanded into new territories, new dimensions, that is, oceans, genetics, and technology. Virupaksha K. Banakar brought the mysteries of the ocean into science fiction in his collection of 5 long stories, Neeli Kandra, meaning Blue Gorge. The author was a senior ocean scientist, and having traveled for thousands of nautical miles in various ships, he has captured the beauty of the ocean along with its peacefulness and ferociousness. Sanjay Havnur added regional flavor and realism, making science relatable. In the 1990s, his SF stories appeared in various magazines. Though the storyline goes a bit western SF trail, the subjects he has dealt with has a tinge of imagination and also appear realistic. Dr. H. Ramachandra Swamy contributed few SF stories in the 90s which got published in various magazines. Nagesh Upadhyaya used detective-style storytelling with scientific twists in the 1990s. 2 of his SF collections are Pachi Jeevi and Duta, published in 2003. The stories start with a problem, and how the secret is unraveled gives a surprising twist at the end. It has a tint of detective style inculcating curiosity. A particularly striking work is by Sumatindra Nadik, who published a novel in 2008 where a genetic experiment results in humans born with tails, raising profound questions about genetic engineering and ethics. The title of the book is Manushanige Bala. Now coming to anthologies and preservation of legacy. Efforts have been made to preserve and promote Kannada science fiction through anthologies edited by this writer Savita Srinivas, like Kannada Vaignanika Kategalu, Naliya Kategalu. These collections serve as valuable archives documenting the evolution of science fiction in Kannada literature. Coming to the conclusion, it is a journey still unfolding. From its early roots in ancient imagination to its modern explorations of space, technology, and ethics, Kannada science fiction has come a long way. It has imagined the future, questioned humanity, reflected society, inspired curiosity, yet it remains a field with immense potential still to be explored. As we stand in an age of artificial intelligence, space exploration, and rapid technological change, the role of Kannada science fiction becomes even more important, because today's science fiction may become tomorrow's reality. With these few words, I would like to end my talk.
Tracks and Trends of Kannada Science Fiction 2008 to 2026. A study by Seema Kulkarni. Namaste, greetings from Malaysia. Today we are exploring the transformative evolution of Kannada science fiction between the years 2008 and 2026. While the genre boasts a proud lineage featuring pioneers like Dr. Shivram Karan, Shri Koradkal Srinarahari, and Shri Na D'Souza, the last 2 decades have marked a massive paradigm shift. As documented in this study, the contemporary Kannada science fiction has transitioned from traditional space travel into deeply philosophical, bioethical, and socio-political narratives. Driven by rapid global advancements in AI, biotechnology, and changing climates, this era highlights a massive surge in contribution from women writers and professionals, profoundly broadening the genre's horizons. This presentation represents a humble effort to highlight the significant trends, thematic concerns, and evolving trajectories of Kannada science fiction over the past 20 years. A brief analysis of the science fiction works by 13 authors is undertaken here within the framework of 3 broad categories, and they are the paradigm shift, catalysts for growth, and socio-cultural expansion. Pioneers of eco-futurism and space logistics. Let us look first at how contemporary writers handle the micro scale, cities, ecosystems, and space travel. Ms. Savita Srinivas, drawing from her background in public service, gives us a brilliant near-future trilogy. She moves from automated urban traffic crisis in her first trilogy novel, Triloka Sanchari Neere, to the harsh logistics of asteroid mining on the moon in the second trilogy novel, Galakke Sikka Chandira. And finally, to climate mitigation using the 5 elements in her third trilogy novel, Mugilagala Jagadagala. She further explores diverse themes in her short story collection, Guptagamini. Similarly, geologist Dr. M. Venkataswamy offers a grand, sober look at mid-21st century United States of India. His work, Bengaluru Y2K50 to Y2K64, accurately projects severe climate realities like the flooding of coastal areas while highlighting a vital truth. Technological innovation cannot replace social justice as automation fails to clear urban poverty on its own. This novel is also translated into English and its title is Bangalore Y2K50. Bioethics, Genetics and Medical Realism. We now take a look at a profound subgenre where Kannada writers hold deep professional expertise, and that is medical science fiction. Dr. Shantala, a practicing gynecologist, infuses her writing with sharp technical accuracy and global acclaim through her short stories in Kannada and English besides her novels. Her medical thriller Devaragalu Muregenu tackles the terrifying moral grey areas of designer babies and unregulated reproductive technology. This novel is translated by the author to English and its title is Playing God. As the title suggests, the novel 3019 AD envisions an advanced civilization shaped by technical innovation, environmental transformations, and evolutionary developments in human biology. Through its richly imagined speculative world, the novel explores the complex interplay between scientific progress and the enduring challenges of human existence. Bananchina Ache is her short story collection that delves into varied themes. We see this theme of reproductive agency echoed beautifully in Miss Ramya's award-winning novel Varnatantu, which destigmatizes prenatal genetic mutations and normalizes IVF conversations using precise Kannada medical terms. On a more human level, Dr. Prasanna Santekadur's novel Sue strips away hyper-advanced gadgets to focus on the raw psychological weight carried by cancer researchers, reminding us that science is driven by human vulnerability. Finally, emerging voice Ms. Sapna Katti represents a new generation of Kannada science fiction writers who successfully integrate scientific knowledge with literary creativity. Her short stories in Kannada and English are particularly significant for their engagement with contemporary debates surrounding artificial intelligence, biotechnology, robotics, and future trajectory of human civilization. Techno thrillers and algorithmic visualization. Moving into the digital and evolutionary realm, agricultural scientist Dr. K.N. Ganeshaya pioneered the techno thrillers in Kannada. His masterpiece Mukha Dhatu brilliantly weaves Darwinian evolution with Buddhist philosophy, imagining a global conspiracy to vaccine erase human desire. His novel Jala Jala is yet another biotechno thriller on biological warfare, geopolitics, marine science, espionage, and digital surveillance. Through his science fiction short stories, Dr. Ganeshaya bridges science, literature, and popular storytelling in modern Kannada science fiction. Looking at everyday digital landscapes, engineers like Sri Gururaj Kulkarni and short fiction writers like Sri Santosh Kumar Mehendale warn us of immediate algorithmic threats. Gururaj Kulkarni's short story collection #explores how AI tracking threatens artistic expression and how post-pandemic societies willingly trade biometric privacy for security. Mehendale's prolific short stories consistently track how we risk surrendering our fundamental critical thinking to automated machines. Parallel existence and real scientific history. The thematic expansion of the genre also includes deep dives into the parallel realities and historical space narratives. Sri Anush Shetty, drawing from his background in electronics and journalism, created a landmark hybrid work with his novel Neenu Ninnodage Kaidi. By fusing science fiction with a crime thriller, he uses concepts of parallel universe and alternate realities to challenge the very stability of human identity and memory. Shifting from multi-universe to our own history, Sri Mahesh R. Nayak's novelette Kupola Kalpitayana takes direct inspiration from the tragic legacy of astronaut Kalpana Chawla. Nayak beautifully weaves aeronautical realism with bold biological speculation, exploring women's empowerment, space biology, and the complex psychological realities of human reproduction on the International Space Station. Transnational perspectives and nurturing the ecosystems. The entire literary boom is supported by a rich underlying ecosystem. Prolific science communicators like Sri Kollegala Sharma have brought science fiction to the public through radio plays, podcasts, translations, and agricultural futurism. His short story collection Beragina Bagilu features 12 short stories that use speculative fiction to explore the societal consequences of emerging technologies and environmental decline. Through relatable cultural settings, Sharma examines human-AI coexistence, the disruption of traditional social and economic structures, the ecological failures driving humanity towards planetary migration, and the impact of technological intervention on agriculture. Collectively, these stories represent a critical reflection on humanity's relationship with technology, sustainability, and environmental responsibility. Finally, contemporary Kannada science fiction has broken past local geographic boundaries to build a truly global outlook. Most of Ms. Sima Kulkarni's stories in English and Kannada expand these boundaries by setting narratives within Southeast Asian cultural landscapes. Her work shifts away from standard Hollywood alien invasion tropes to focus on peaceful, optimistic contact, biological cybersecurity, and humanitarianism. This study would be incomplete without acknowledging the significant efforts undertaken to promote science fiction in Kannada literature through both publishing initiatives and literary outreach programs. A crucial contribution has been the publication of science fiction through prominent print and digital magazines such as Prabuddha Karnataka, Koravanji, Balavigyan, Kutuhali, Mayura, Sudha, Taranga, and Tushara, many of which have released dedicated science fiction issues, thereby providing an important platform for science fiction writers and readers. Equally noteworthy is the organization of a series of science fiction writing workshops conducted across Karnataka for children, women, and aspiring writers from diverse age groups. These workshops were facilitated by distinguished resource persons including Dr. Sri Narahari, the late Sri Rajasekhar Bhusnurmat, the late Sri Hershey Bhairanahatti, and Professor M. Abdul Rahman Pasha. The workshop not only nurtured creative writing skills but also resulted in the publication of several science fiction anthologies. Notable among these are 101 Science Fiction Stories Written by Children, Volume 1 and 2, ಮುಂದಾನೊಂದು ಕಾಲದ ಕಥೆಗಳು and ಮುಂದಾನೊಂದು ಕಾಲದಲ್ಲಿ. Together, these initiatives have played a vital role in fostering a vibrant science fiction culture within Kannada literature and encouraging new generation of writers and readers to engage with the genre. Conclusion. In conclusion, the period from the year 2008 to 2026 shows that Kannada science fiction has truly come of age. It is no longer just a basic tool to teach children science facts. It is sophisticated, mature literary medium. As highlighted throughout this study, it successfully takes global complex concepts from quantum mechanics and multi-universe to gene editing and climate collapse and embeds them smoothly into local cultural values and social realities. It holds up a vital mirror to our fast evolving world, providing that regional literature is fully equipped to navigate the future of humanity. I would like to express my sincere gratitude to Dr. Sri Narahari and Ms. Savita Srinivas for their invaluable guidance, encouragement, and support throughout this assignment. I am also deeply appreciative of the authors whose exceptional works of speculative fiction made this study both insightful and enjoyable. Finally, I extend my thanks to IASFS for providing this opportunity and my special thanks to the organizing.
Thank you, ma'am, for your insightful presentation. Hello, everyone. With this, we are at the end of our presentations. And I, Neha Jain, Executive Secretary, Indian Association of Science Fiction Studies, on behalf of everyone, thank all of you for your presence, patience, and cooperation in the last 2 days. We had an excellent inaugural session yesterday where we had a chance to meet scientists and writers of science and science fiction in India. The session was an extended one, and Dr. G.S. Ayyappan, scientist from CSIR, shared his works and interacted with students here to steer young minds to think and create. We also had poet Balki with his insights, and Mr. A.P. Deshpande, who has been working tirelessly at the grassroots level as a leader and science communicator in India, focusing on regional science fiction at the same time. We were very glad to have such leaders with us, and unfortunately we couldn't keep adherence to time, and we lost track of time in the process. The sessions As a result, scheduled yesterday were delayed but not cancelled at all. Each presentation was beamed, and we really apologize if you couldn't attend the session when it was beamed. The presentations of both the day's sessions will be available by tomorrow on our Indian Association of Science Fiction Studies website, and you can watch the missed sessions over there. We also had many presentations online and offline in the last 2 days. Thank you once again for your kind cooperation, and we offer our heartfelt apologies for inconveniences caused. We would now be heading for a small lunch break before the final valedictory session, which will start at 2:30 p.m. and will be made live on Channel 1. Stay tuned. The participants will receive e-certificates through registered email ID in some days. Feel free to write to us in case of any questions, observations, suggestions for us to improve. And thank you so much. See you soon. Channel 1. So the valedictory session will be live on Channel 1. Stay tuned on Channel 1. We meet at 2:30 p.m. Thank you, everyone.